Good morning, Jamie.
Hello.
Thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me on the subject of, it's really broad, isn't it? Men and women. Men
and women, and these days, everything in between.
Everything in between as well. And basically, I've been really motivated to have these chats because I realize I was just living in a world of my own in my head about what, men and women and how we interact and what that's all about. And occasionally, I'll be totally honest, crashing up against men in the world often, and sometimes women too, in sort of fairly aggressive ways, I think. And then what I realized would be probably more useful is to actually start to engage in some meaningful conversations, put my ego aside a little bit, and start to listen to understand, So that's basically my main intention today is to listen to understand and to sort of increase my understanding of what it's like to be a man in the world, what kind of challenges you might be facing. And I know that you work with people, so you probably have lots of insight there too.
Let's do it.
Yeah. So why did you say yes to this chat?
Well, I've been feeling quite passionate that the relationship and the ongoing, you could say, battle between the sexes that has been going on like forever is a massive metaphor and a direct cause of so much more of the problems on the planet, the eco-side, the raping of Mother Earth, the situation of the state the planet is in is a metaphor and a direct result of the lack of communication and the constant battle between men and women, and especially how, even though there's a beautiful movement of men becoming more conscious and wanting to move beyond the violence and the control and the silencing, culturally, men are doing their best now to step past their conditioning of never showing their vulnerabilities, being very isolated and closed down. They're wanting to move beyond the abuse of male leadership, which has been manifesting through sort of dominion and rape and control, and move it into what it should be, which is love and service. And you've got a lot of men, showing up for self-development things, playing with their children, opening up to their spouses and partners, playing with their kids. There's been so much violence that we can't just expect that just because that's going on, that the women are all going to just welcome them with open arms and go, oh, well, it's all fine now. We can't skip the steps of healing that needs to happen. And it's a tricky thing because a lot of the men themselves would say, well, I've never done anything violent to a woman, so, what have I got to apologize for? And we need to kind of get beyond that thing and kind of apologize on behalf of all of our male ancestors and have some sort of a set of meetings and coming togethers where we collaborate, the men and the women, to heal that past wounding and forgive. And at the end of apartheid, Nelson Mandela set up these meetings all over South Africa called, I think it was called Truth and Reconciliation, something like that, where everyone came forward and said what they'd perpetrated or what they'd received or what had happened, and it saved a bloodbath. And I think we need something like that, to not miss that crucial step of healing that isn't just about the men changing their attitudes and ways. And of course, there's many things that women have to do too, like on the women's side. I know it's not even. I wouldn't even pretend to think that the violence has been equal both ways. But there has been a lot of violence, not only domestic physical beating up violence from women to men, which there's a lot of, but emotional violence, control, manipulation, using sexuality, weaponizing sexuality, control, you only get to have sex if you're a good boy, or, you know. And there's another level as well, which is, and I don't think this is acknowledged by our culture, which is that I believe, and this is popular for everybody, but it does seem to play out, that men are addicted to women's radiance. We need something from the women's radiance, literally, that isn't a two-way thing. There's something that men need from women that women don't really need from men. And hence, the methadone version of that addiction is porn. You know, there's a reason why 99% of the internet is porn for men.
Yeah.
And that's like the methadone version of the addiction of, like, if you can't get it healthily, you'll go there. And it's not really acknowledged. You know, there's this, well, men should just, you know, get responsible. And it's like, they don't have the education or the skills to meet women where they need to be met in order to have the two-way street of love and radiance, and to get what the men need. And so they're going to get it one way or another. So if they can't find a way to get it healthily, they'll get it unhealthily, through porn, through violence, through dominion. And until we acknowledge that men do have this addiction to the women's radiance, which often plays out through sexuality and the sort of lower energies as well, it's never going to stop. And our culture is not very good at the compassionate side of the predicament the men are in, needing this thing, almost being addicted to this thing that they don't know how to get.
Yes. Yeah. You said sexuality and low energies. What do you mean by that?
I mean that there are many ways to receive women's radiance that aren't in the lower chakras of the sexuality. Not that it's lower as in base, as in bad, or always carnal, but there's, you know, there's the heart, there's the voice, there's the vision. And those are often subtler energies which men haven't been trained to work with. And so immediately the energy just gravitates down to the second chakra and the base chakra, where it's more carnal, where it's more purely sexual, but not always sex driven by the heart.
I think one thing that always occurs to me is that like, oftentimes I kind of don't see men acknowledging that sex for men, just biologically, is like a sort of low impact thing, in terms of they won't have to ever carry the baby that might be made by that act. Do you know what I mean? And they won't. And it's like, for me, sometimes just acknowledging that even if we raise our consciousness and we do all of this work on our stuff, there's some kind of biological stuff that means that I'm just reading this book called A Billion Wicked Thoughts, where they analysed how people search for sort of sexual stuff on the internet and what kind of stuff, and they found like a really marked difference between men and women. And for example, when asked if they would go home with a fairly attractive person on the university campus of the opposite sex, 76% of the men said yes, and only 6% of the women said yes. To the opposite sex, which to me, you know, it's just obvious. It's like, well, I don't really know you, you know, and if that turned out of creating a child together, then what does that mean? That means I'm on my own. Do you know what I mean? Or maybe not, but who knows? And that doesn't necessarily matter to men, because they can just walk away, whereas you can't walk away from a baby growing inside you and then the sort of societal expectation that you raise that child, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
So sometimes I like to sort of strip out the emotional component and just make it really simple for myself like that, almost so that I don't judge men so harshly, you know, for how they turn up.
Yeah. I mean, you also can't ignore the fact that men on a biological level, a third of a man's daily energy every day is spent creating sperm.
Wow, I didn't know that.
And that is sending a message to the brain that it needs to be used
Mhm.
And it's a very driving force. You know, when a man sees an image or sees in real life a beautiful woman or a sexy, or what he sees as a sexy woman, something happens which almost like shuts down his reason.
Mm.
You know, you can sort of see the image of men in a pole dancing club or whatever, like they're literally like hypnotized. There's a
Yeah.
kind of hypnosis on the woman that they'll empty out their wallet, you know, they'll just like, and it's not just modern day conditioning. You can go all the way back to the Bible with Salome, you know, dance for me, Salome. King Herod says, I'll give you anything. And then she wants the head
Mm.
of John the Baptist, or kingdoms have fallen.
Mm.
And it's almost like women's beauty does something to the man's brain, which is mixed probably with the constant signals he's getting to his brain from his cock. It does something that men literally lose control over, you know.
Mm.
And as I said, I don't think women have that imperative going on where they're just constantly being hooked.
Yeah, apparently the neurology is actually really quite different in desire in men and women.
Yeah.
They're sort of beginning to discover that, which I find absolutely fascinating. And of course, you know, the angry feminist in me says, well, sort your shit out, men. Do you know what I
I
mean? If we
know, and
can't
that's the problem.
Yeah.
That's the problem, is that I think, you know, oddly, I think there is an age, if we could get over our religious puritanical whatevers, if there was a healthy kind of sex worker thing
Mm.
where men could be more educated and men could be held in the vulnerability of that hook
Mm.
and learn ways to work with it without shaming. But
Right.
it's so loaded with all the violence that's come before it, and all the control and all the silencing and all the catcalling from building sites. And, you know,
Mm.
it's so loaded with so much pain that hasn't been healed. That's why it comes back to not skipping the steps of healing.
Yeah.
It's so loaded with all of that trigger that it's very hard for our culture to be compassionate towards the predicament the men are in with this.
Mm.
And if we were compassionate and we really did acknowledge that addiction and that hook to that radiance that men don't seem to be in power of, then we might have a sort of different kind of sex worker which were working with men in a way that wasn't just come and have a quick hand job, but was actually, it wasn't just like a release. It was actually about gaining mastery of that energy. Because when the male sexual energy is mastered, it becomes incredible architecture. It becomes
Yeah.
wonderful hospitals. It becomes systems to protect the children and the elders. It
Mm.
becomes the correct use of male leadership. And so our whole culture would benefit from that. But we're just religiously and through those triggers and past unhealed wounds, we're not there yet. And I would really love to facilitate more progression around that.
Mm. And so what do you feel women would be, because you were very concise about what men, you know, would be apologizing for? Do you have an equal grasp of what women would be apologizing for?
Weaponizing that addiction,
Okay.
using that addiction to control men and get what they want through using that, abusing that power of being able to hook men in. You know, I can't wear something a bit sexier to make it more likely I'll pass my driving test. I know it sounds a bit of a shallow thing, and I do
No,
understand that
I hear you. Yeah.
women will use what they've got, of course.
Mm.
There is a way to get to control men through the giving and taking of the sexuality that men need so much. So holding it when you don't get what you want and giving it when you do get what you want, it perpetuates that addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying all women do it,
No.
but in our culture, it is, you know, whether it be done by women or done by men, that radiance, that women's mainly sexuality, is commodified to sell everything from cars to toothpaste.
Yeah.
And it would take a lot for the unconsciousness around I can get more of what I want when I'm sexier, when I'm flirtier, where I make myself look more available maybe than I am. It's perpetuating it. And it's understandable because women need to use whatever power they've got in our culture, because it's so uneven already. So I understand it. But it does perpetuate it. So the lack of compassion around the predicament of the men because of past wounding, because the men are not doing themselves any favors, taking, raping, controlling, and all their ancestors have done it too. And the women using what they can use, which is that power to get what they want to, I know very many relationships where the man only gets sex when he's a good boy. And if he hasn't been a good boy, he doesn't get sex. And that creates a very deep rage and powerlessness in men that plays out through destroying the planet, through domestic violence. Not only, but it's in there. And I just don't think us as a culture are really having that conversation.
No, and I mean, being somebody who's kind of tuned into, for example, menstrual cycles, like how that impacts our desire across the month and things. I sometimes think that conversation's really hard to have in that context, because it's like, well, in this whole week, I just don't feel like it. And I accept you will feel like it. And I might be angry at you because of almost nothing, because of this hormonal surge. And I've seen men in my vicinity get angry or frustrated about that. It's like, well, you're kind of using that as an excuse. It's like, well, I'm really not.
That's not using it to control a man. That's just using it because you totally justifiably aren't sexy this week. That's right. Different. And as I said, if there weren't so many triggers in other areas, I think that men could be better educated in that. I certainly have found the men that I know who I would definitely think are sort of maybe on the more conscious side. And with my girlfriend, I know her cycle, like I'm not an idiot. If you're in an intimate relationship with a woman, find out know her cycle and know that this week is going to be more tender and that week is going to be more sexy halfway through the cycle, and be ready with the chocolate when she's premenstrual, like be collaborative. There's a lot of organizations out there, like Ruby May has Know Your Flow. There's lots of other things. And
there are even people who do courses for men who are in relationships with women. Yeah.
And it's not that complicated.
No, it's really not.
And just as long as you know where your partner is in the cycle, you can both collaborate so that everybody's needs are met. And there's like a lot of opportunities, even if it's not full-on sex, there is still opportunities for exchanging sexual energy, which can still be very fulfilling.
Yeah, or intimacy of other kinds,
and holding and championing and someone's trying to call me. Daughter 3.
It does seem to me that what we're butting up against so often is, and it would be solved, that's the thing, it would be solved by that approach of sort of restorative conversations, because it's essentially two people saying, I'm the victim. No, really, I'm the victim. No, I don't think you're hearing me because of this, and this. I'm the victim. Yes, but equal and opposite, I'm actually the victim. And these conversations just back and forth without anybody actually sort of acknowledging what's true for the other person.
Yeah, and therefore it has to be collaborative. And the more people meet and get collaborative, the more other people will see them being collaborative and the benefits, and they'll do it too. Things that work catch on. And so that's what we need to create in the world, is more examples of being collaborative, being teammates in this stuff rather than adversaries.
Yeah. And it's just beautiful to live that way when you can achieve it with one other human. I think it's really compelling to see. And
then everyone gets what they want.
It's what we all want, right? Is actual intimacy where you're seen in your full glory and full messiness and still loved anyway, you know,
And
maybe
that's where
even
we
more
come
so.
back to the past wounding, not skipping the steps of healing, because as long as that healing hasn't happened, then there's so much of a trigger that's going to keep sending us into, yeah, but this is your fault, this is not my fault, this is your stuff, this isn't my stuff. And that comes from unhealed wounds. That doesn't come from common sense.
No.
And the unhealed wounds of the past will keep trying to creep in and create more drama because there's so much unresolved pain. So as well as doing the modern day, let's learn each other's cycles and be teammates and collaborate, there needs to be, let's also collaborate on clearing the wounding of the past, and even having ceremonies, having conversations, having meetings where we work towards forgiveness. It's not going to happen overnight. And those two things have to happen hand in hand. There's the stuff that is the present day stuff of collaboration and teammates, and there's the stuff which is from the past, which is getting rid of the accumulation of pain. And it's the same, not just with men and women, it's the same just with each of us as individuals.
Yeah.
We've all got to work on ourselves in the present day so that we're not so governed by our crazy minds, so that we're not sort of avoiding our bodies and our feelings, so that we're not totally sort of consumed by the external world, glorifying being busy, trying to make money. You know, we're creating our consciousness and our presence in the moment and our love. But we've all got work to do also on our past wounding, on what happened to us when we were kids, on the love we didn't get, on the confusions of our childhoods, and all that stuff. We've all got to be clearing out the past as well as being creative in the now. And that's two different jobs. I mean, they're very connected, but it's two different jobs. You've got to be setting the correct foundations by clearing the past so that you've got a good bit of land to build on, and you've got the present day building of the new temple. But you can't build the new temple on old, rocky, fucked up, polluted ground.
Yeah, I'm
Clean
looking to
the
my
ground
left.
and build the temple. So there's work to do in the past and work to do with the present, which is quite different.
I'm looking to my left at my whiteboard here because I have a diagram of exactly that, and at the bottom it says foundations, and then there's that's definitely my model of it too. And that takes like a level of radical personal responsibility that I feel is becoming more and more kind of unquestionably needed in people in the
and
world.
It's got to be modeled. You know, there's got to be examples of it. You can't just leave people to just sort of work it out. You know, I think we could create beautifully packaged, stage by stage, very simple processes so that can be done, so people aren't just sort of left out in the wind.
Right, exactly.
And make it free. You know, I mean, how amazing would it be if it was a government thing where you kind of downloaded these PDFs, and these are these led conversations, asking each other these questions. What do you need? Learning how to listen, learning how to feel the triggers in your body so they don't reach the mouth before you've had a chance to breathe through them. You know, very simple techniques. It's not brain surgery or rocket science.
No,
it's not rocket surgery.
No, it's incredibly simple actually, and it's not always easy. That's kind of how I frame that.
Yeah. On another note, just a separate tiny little thing, something I really want to do, and I'm looking through my contacts at the moment for who's got contacts in this area, is I would love to get in touch with the England team. And, you know, whenever England play, domestic violence statistics shoot through the roof.
Yeah.
And whenever England lose, they shoot even higher. But even if they play, even if they win, they still shoot through the roof. How amazing would it be for, you know, they take a knee for racism. How amazing would it be for the England team to make a clear statement, or even do a different thing, take a different knee before the match, saying real men protect women?
Oh yeah, I've got goosebumps all over from that.
So doable and so right. I'm sure if they knew, if the players knew the stats,
you don't think they will?
Huh?
Yeah. You don't think they do know?
No.
No.
One or two of them might. I think if they all knew and someone sat down and said, listen, you take a knee for racism, let's take a knee for this and say why. I think it could make a difference.
Amazing. I really hope you achieve that. Mm-hmm.
I'm on it.
Cool. Brilliant. Okay, well, we're coming to the end of our half an hour.
Thank you.
I'm very grateful for this conversation. Thank you so much.
Well, we can have more, we could do this every few months and see if we've made any progress.
Yeah, that would be good. That would be really good. Perfect. Okay, well, thank you very much.
Brilliant.
I will stop our recording. Mm-hmm.